just want to thank you so much for being such on time coming back from the break. It means we are on time, a few minutes after schedule. But having that said, we are going to introduce a fantastically exciting and intriguing person. He is from formerly WikiLeaks, now co-founder of OpenLeaks, and he has some very, very intriguing thoughts for us today. So please welcome on stage Daniel Domscheit-Berg. I think that's it. Good to see you. I must admit, I said Daniel Domscheit-Berg, didn't I? Yes, and that was I was all confused by the AKAs. Yeah. Because you're the only speaker here today that actually has an sort of also known as kind of a name.
That's not sure if anybody remembers that. Yeah,
no?
But that's true. Yeah, it used to be Daniel Schmidt was kind of a cover name back at WikiLeaks, but
okay.
Whatever use a cover name in a digitally surveilled society is anyways.
Yeah. So how do you say your last name now?
It's Domscheit-Berg.
Domscheit-Berg. Was that good? Yeah, good.
Perfect.
And also I would like to say, because one thing, I used to work radio, and then you would sit in a little room, you would be all by yourself, and you would be talking, and suddenly I made this call to the audience, and I'm saying, okay, you know what, are you pro or against abortion? Please send me a little bit of a text message. And then I got and for Norway this is huge, more than 100,000 replies. And just the same thing, can you tell me a little bit, because I thought that would be an interesting point, when you were sitting in the old days, and then suddenly you realized that you're actually more or less opening up the world. How did that feel?
It felt great. Can't say anything else, because first of all, that's what it did, and then I think this was one of the most important things I could have ever contributed to. Fantastic. And that's kind of what I'll be speaking about in a minute too.
It's excellent. You know what, Danny, the stage is all yours. It's about what you said, the past, the present, and the future of more or less the world and how we work.
Yes.
Fantastic. Daniel, give it up.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so it's always a bit hard to understand if the sound is okay. Can everybody hear me well? In case that is so, thanks. So, as it was introduced, I'll be speaking about past, present, and future. I think that's kind of how you could wrap it up, as ambiguous as it sounds. As an introduction, maybe to help me understand who I'm speaking to, I'd just like to ask one question, and that is, whom of you has kids or plans to have kids or knows kids that he finds sympathetic? Okay, so that is about everybody. So at some stages while I'm speaking about a few of these topics, maybe it helps to remember that you know these kids or that you have these kids or whatever. Because a lot of what I'm thinking of is, let's say, inspired by the fact that I have a kid who's 13. And I think we have a responsibility to also take into account the perspective for the next generation. Now here in Norway you have the oil fund, which is why I'm very, very deeply impressed by this country. Because you have already proven that you can look beyond today. You have understood that you need to think about tomorrow. So to some extent I hope that you will understand the story. So I'll start quickly by explaining to you who I am, because that might help to put a few things in perspective too. I grew up in a regular family, you could say, and at the age of 8 in 1986, I was presented with my first computer. Now back then that wasn't really very common. There were only 2 other kids in my class that had a computer. And we started to exchange games and programs and stuff like this. One of the earliest lessons I had was that my father had this awful collection of Jethro Tull music cassettes. And I could just use these cassettes and I could kind of remix the information on these cassettes, and suddenly these cassettes would hold a computer game. That was a really fascinating kind of experience for me. When I was 10, for Christmas, I got a toy that you could connect to the Commodore 64, made by Fischer Technik. It's a German company, and they had a robot arm with an interface to the computer. So at the age of 10, my father taught me some programming, and I could suddenly use this computer to interact with the real world, to take an object and move it to another location. Now that was another, I think, really important lesson for me. And all of these things, when I got online for the first time, finding out that there's plenty of people that share my interest in really strange things, that where in my hometown I couldn't find anyone to be interested in that. That's another lesson. And all of these lessons kind of, I think, shaped me in one really important facet, and that is that I think the generation growing up with technology and the internet doesn't really take things for granted in some sense. We want to change things, we want to improve. We have a very hard time with accepting that something is just made for one purpose. For example, we think about repurposing things, remixing things, enhancing things, making them better than they were supposed to be. And I think this is kind of the potential for the young generation today. And here I am back with my 13-year-old kid for the first time. He has a tremendous potential for making this world a better place. All he requires is somebody to introduce him into using all of these tools, to show him that he can use all of these wonderful tools that we have today, the internet-enabled technology and all of that, that he can use that in order to create something that is meaningful, that will make his world and the world for his kids a better place. And if it doesn't work, he can fix it. Because that's another really important lesson, I think, is that lots of these kids today, they can learn how to fix things. And if something doesn't work, they can understand it. And out of that understanding, fix whatever is broke. And I think in a world that requires a lot of fixing in a lot of different areas of this world, this is a tremendously important lesson to learn, and it is a lesson that we urgently need to bring into the classrooms of this world so that children understand that. And they don't take things so much for granted as still, unfortunately, our generation does. Now, I grew up in this sense. I discovered technology very early. I got connected to the internet in 94, 95, around that time, which was kind of early on as well. I started networking with people, and in the same sense that I discovered that there are so many things that I can dive into and I can start to understand, I discovered that with every day passing, the world is getting more complicated. And actually, in the same way that I can get information, there will always be more information than I can digest and more information that I can work with. So when I started to think political at some stage, I started to wonder what is the basis, the informational basis for decisions I'm taking. And I started to get really frustrated with this because I found out, at least this was my perception, that there are a lot of things in this world that I can't really understand. Now, if I can't understand them, how can I, as a consumer, as somebody that's going to vote for his first time and then repeatedly onwards for all the rest of his life, somebody that is interacting with other human beings, how can I, as that person, take decisions that do not harm everybody else, decisions that are more meaningful than what springs to mind in the first place, or what would maybe be my first reaction. So I think essentially this is kind of why in 2007 I ended up with a WikiLeaks project. So there's a lot that has happened in between, but in 2007 I discovered the WikiLeaks project, and the idea of that project was, quite simply, to enable so-called whistleblowers to have a voice on the internet. So to use the internet technology to enable all those people that know what is happening behind closed curtains and that know about shady things going on, things that are maybe not in the best interest of society, things we morally or ethically cannot agree with, to give these people the possibility to use the internet as a tool to spread the word about what they know. And I think this is a really important idea. My conviction to be involved in this is quite simply based on the fact that I want to take better decisions. So it was quite a selfish, you could call it a selfish decision to involve in that, but I think this is part of the spirit of today. And if we again look around in the world and we see how many problems there are, maybe we need to work more towards that kind of transparency. Maybe this is one kind of a transparency that can help us to understand what is going on and to take better decisions that are not harming anybody. Now, that's a bit about my background maybe. If we try to understand what actually is happening today and what this whole digital sphere is about, then I think there's a couple of things we all should know. So about 250, 300 years ago, in society, kind of kicked off by the Renaissance in France, you could say the movement of individualists started. This is where the first time in history, for the first time, people started to see themselves as individuals. This is where I think part of what largely defines us today was kind of kicked off in society. Before that, you know, houses wouldn't have a bedroom because everybody was sleeping in the same room. They were eating in the same room where other people were sleeping and having sex. This was all happening in the same room, and if you had family visiting you, they would be there too. So at some stage, somebody thought, why not make a private room, a room people could retreat into, a room that is only to them. And this was how the bedroom happened at some stage. And for the first time, there was a concept that there is a physical space in which people can retreat and have something called privacy. Now, at the same time, historically, the first people started to write autobiographies, because with that sense of seeing and understanding yourself as an individual, people started to reflect upon themselves. They started to think about their own role in society and their own, let's say, relation to other people on an individual basis, and they started to write it down. Now, today, a few hundred years later, I think we live in a society that is highly individualized. All of you probably live a very individualized, individualistic lifestyle. You're kind of writing down your own history, whether you're blogging or you're using Twitter or whatever else. You're living a work-life balance, something like this. You're going on a holiday, you're planning for your family and all of that. And this is just a consequence of this change in society, in culture, where today we all are highly individualistic. We're all trying to be different, actually, from everybody else, trying to find our own niche. Now, we also live in a time where we have the internet. And the internet, to me, so I come from a network perspective, by trade or by profession or whatever you want to call that. I'm a network technician. And to me, the most wonderful thing about the internet is that it puts everybody that is connected on an eye level. So I used to say in the face of the internet protocol, all men and women are created equal. And that kind of is very true, because in a neutral network, and this is basically what net neutrality, if you ever heard about it, is about. In a neutral internet network, whoever connects is the same as everybody else. It doesn't matter what color your skin is, what sex you are. It doesn't matter what your social background is. It doesn't matter if you're skinny or fat or whatever else. All that counts is that you are connected in the same way as everybody else. And you have the same kind of rights as everybody else. You have the same right to speak to everybody. And if you have something that is intelligent enough, that is funny enough, maybe stupid enough, it doesn't really matter. But if it's enough for anything, you will find people that listen to it. And you don't require somebody in between to allow you to do that. There is no censor. There is no one judging over what you have to say and deeming it meaningful or not meaningful enough to be published. So we live in a world in which all of these individuals that we are interconnected by a tool, and that tool is the internet. Now, what does that mean? This means essentially, I think, on some level, that because we're connected, I can find out by meeting everyone that is not here today, because I meet you here physically, but everyone that is not here, I can meet online and understand that they are just the same kind of individuals as I am, that they just want to be happy and live meaningful lives as I do. So the potential is there that we could understand on an empathic level that the world is made out of people just like us. And I think in a society that is struggling with a lot of problems that are global, whether this is economic problems or whether this is the environment or whether it's questions about starvation or whatever else, like really existential questions our society is facing today. In these times, this technology is mission critical, if you so want. Without that empathic extension, without some kind of a global consciousness for all of us developing, we will not find answers to a lot of the problems we are facing today. We won't be able to find a solution. Now, on some level, I think, if you try to compare what's happening here to what has happened in society, you could say that we have so far lived in societies that are highly exclusive, that are always made out of defining yourself or your group as exclusive to everybody else. Whether this is the idea of a nation state where one group is Norwegian and everybody else is not Norwegian, or whether this is in the fact that we start to build societies in which we are part, or kind of networks or whatever. So all of this is happening in all kinds of levels of society. Now, we have historically come out of that time of exclusive groups. But with the internet, that is changing. It is changing because suddenly we have a mechanism that is inclusive, that is encouraging everybody to take part. That is not just encouraging everybody, but actually enabling everybody to take part. And that is kind of reducing us to a horizontal level where there's not much of a difference anymore. So I think if we're all individuals and living all of these individual lifestyles, the internet can help us to understand that the world is made out of all these individuals. And if we can understand that, I think there is a big potential to make this world a better place. It's probably the biggest potential and the biggest historic possibility for a more just society that we will ever get. Now, this is all sounds great, at least to me. So what's the problem? With digitalization, one thing also has changed. It is that everything that we do is being recorded. Is that there is nothing happening kind of in privacy or in private anymore. And if we look at what's been covered in the news in the last months, we're looking at one of the most disturbing developments that is possible for a free society, for a society made out of individuals. And this is that our world is getting rid of privacy. In the last months, I'm sure Norway has some news coverage on Edward Snowden and his revelations. In the last months, we have learned that there's a few exclusive groups called secret services that are collecting and storing forever all the information, all the communication, and whatever else there is that we create, produce, transact, or whatever. This is historically different from any time before. This is something you need to understand. In a digital world, there is no limit. There is no limit in how much all of that information can be stored for somebody in the future to use it. And this is a real threat. If you don't understand how much, or if you have something to hide, or you don't immediately see that, ask yourself one question. If you ever have a kid, and whoever has a kid, I think wants that kid to achieve something in the future, would you want your kid to grow up in a world in which, if he ever becomes meaningful, he or she becomes meaningful, that there is a group of people that know everything about that kid since basically the first day it started communicating, and that information can then be used to either blackmail or buy the kid, maybe prevent your kid from changing the world because they know too much about that kid? Is that a world you would see developing? Not me. As I said, I think my kid has a lot of potential for doing something really great in this world, and I wouldn't want this to be prevented by a group of people that know too much about what he said to somebody maybe 20 years ago. If that still is not enough, I'd ask you for a short thought experiment. So we're speaking about big data. This is one of the biggest problems or biggest topics of these days. All of what I'm trying to aim at, the collection of all that data, is a big data problem. Now, I come from Germany, and historically, Germany was the first country to run a big data project, if you so want. And that big data project was the Second World War, which was essentially run in a partnership with IBM, who are still around these days. Not sure if any one of you has ever heard that in the history courses at school. I doubt so. Or heard it via another route. But these are all hard facts. It's not a conspiracy theory or anything like this. But whatever country was invaded by Germany had IBM in that country already. And they were there to provide information about the population of this country. They were there as a service provider, similar, so as we can see all these service providers today that are storing and transacting all this information that we have. And they agreed, because they had a commercial interest, to hand over all of that data to the invading Germans. And if you ever wondered how in hell the Germans could come up with all these lists of people to be deported, this is how it happened. When the Germans invaded Poland, IBM had carried out a census of the population, and they could just hand over the data, and all you then needed was a machine. Back then, it was alphabetizers and sorting machines and whatever else. It was machines to sort who speaks Jewish and who speaks Polish to identify who is part of the Eastern Jewish group that had gotten the highest priority. It's as simple as that. Now, the lesson out of that is twofold. One is that business will always do what creates business. This is something you as people, as human beings, need to understand. Just look at what's happening with the NSA today. They're all cooperating. We just had this really nice presentation here from Google. Now, I like Google for a lot of things, but I get dead scared if, similar to Siri, there now is an application that I can ask all the questions that are bothering me. But nobody ensures me that all these questions I have asked that phone and the cloud behind it will not ever get into the wrong hands. We're not having that debate. Why? Why is there no ethical debate about all this technology? Why can we afford not having that debate? I don't think so. I really, really don't think so. And we need to understand that none of what we take for granted today is actually for granted. Who can assure that we're living in a democratic society in 5 years' time? No one can. But what is going to protect us then if we did not have that debate about what is happening with that data, or who will be able to use it, or where it will be stored and how it will be accessible by somebody? This is a real issue. Now, going back to IBM, maybe, I think today, we live in a time where we as a generation have a window of opportunity. There's a big opportunity for, again, making this world a better place by using the technologies and the tools that we have today. There's a tremendous potential for positive in big data. You could identify, if you ever get cancer, somebody can identify the perfect treatment for your type of cancer based on all the other cases of cancer that have ever been there, because they're recorded and we have the possibility to find out what is the best treatment for you. This is a hugely big potential. But on the other hand, there's this big potential for abusing that data. And we today live in a time where there's a window of opportunity in which we can take influence on that. And partly because we have learned about all the data that is being stored and collected by the secret services of this world. This is what is enabling this debate, but the debate is not happening. Now, as I said, back to IBM. I think if you need a reason, or if you need an understanding of what's happening, IBM always is a good company to look at. This window of opportunity is going to close. And I'll tell you how. So none of you in the future will be able to say he didn't see it coming. You know, by the fact that you are here today listening to me, you're unable to get off the hook. And this is really important because you have a responsibility. Now, that window of opportunity is going to change with one technology that is in the development right now. And this is a technology called the Open Power Initiative that is developed by IBM. The idea is to create something called cognitive computing. So I'm pretty sure that, again, back to the Google phone, this is an application for cognitive computing, because this will be the first kind of real artificial intelligence. It is chips where the chip moves away from copper towards light. Because copper, maybe you know, with copper and silicon, there's only so much density that we can get. It cannot go any smaller, basically, than it is today. With light, this is different. So IBM has this open power initiative that is going to create chips that are kind of based on interacting with light. So you take those chips and you plug them together, and they have optical signals in between them. And just to give you an idea, a few weeks ago there was a real breakthrough at a university in the US that has created an optical switch for this kind of technology, so a switch that is just transacting light back and forth. And we're speaking about nanotechnology here. If I remember correctly, the switch is about a 20th of the size of a single hair. So this is the kind of physical size we're speaking about. It's all going to get very, very tiny. And by getting so tiny, you can take a lot of that and just stick it together, and it's not going to use up a lot of room. Now, you can use that technology to build the biggest brain you can imagine. This is what cognitive computing is about. These are chips that no one needs to program, but they're just like your brain. They're learning by themselves. You plug them together and then you feed them some information, and they're going to be able to interpret it without an algorithm. The only fact that we are today not screwed is because the algorithms are so bad. And because of all this data that everybody is collecting, no one can make a sense out of it. But this is going to change with this technology. And as soon as that is going to be rolled out, as soon as that technology is ready for the market, one thing will happen. And this is that from one moment to another, all the surveillance cameras installed in London, I'm sure you heard about how many there are, all those cameras will be interpreted simultaneously and in real time by an intelligent system behind it. This is the end of privacy. This is where suddenly we live in a world that has eyes all over it, and there's a big brain that can interpret all these eyes and that has no technical limit anymore. And again, a few days ago, you can read a Wired article about it. somebody from advanced research at IBM has just been speaking about exactly that. Embrace biometrics. Stop fearing biometrics. The game's over anyways. Embrace it because it has some kind of a potential. Doesn't speak about what the potential is, but doesn't even speak about the ethical problems. You know, they wrote a book about cognitive computing. Doesn't mention ethics a single time in the whole book. So the question is this the world we want to steer in? Again, we live in a time where there is a window of opportunity, where we can have influence on these kinds of developments. And it begins with the need for each and every one of you to not be distracted all the time, but to start acting up on something that is so important for the future of a free society. You know, I'm here in a crowd of probably most of you are marketing people, I don't know, but is there a market without individuals? Is there somebody to market to if there is no free society? I don't know, maybe that is how you can relate to that, I don't know. But we must not sit idly by thinking that somehow this whole surveillance thing is kind of outrageous, but we can't really do anything about it anyways. That's not true. You all are living in a democratic society, and this means that you are a sovereign. You are the ones making the rules for what is happening in this world. We're not speaking about the second law of thermodynamics. We're speaking about man-made problems. And coming back to what I said in the beginning, I truly and honestly believe we can change whatever we want to change. All that it requires is the will to take action. So to conclude my statement here, I think it is a time in which you, every one of you as individuals, have more power than you can imagine. And it is your responsibility to make use of that power for something good and to change society in a way that we as individuals can survive. So thank you for your attention, and I hope you make something out of that.
Thank you so much. We are definitely going to talk tomorrow. What I was hoping for was that I've asked my techies downstairs, and they said this one is still in use. So I was just going to, let's see here, put this up. So your quote was tweeted, and your wife came online saying hello to us. So I figured that would be a little bit of a nice thing. I bet the sentence was said by my husband. I've heard it before, and it remains true. Enjoy Gulltaggen, everyone. So hello to Anke and your wife from all over here. Very, very nice. We are going to have a discussion tomorrow.
Yes.
So I would just encourage everyone in the room, if you do have more questions, you want to talk, or do you want to sort of help me a little bit out to formulate those questions, because the two of us is going to have a little bit of a debate tomorrow afternoon for about 20 minutes. So with that said, thank you so much. Thank you very much. Give him a big round of applause. Thank you.